Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a good day and a good week. This is a continuation of the stream that I started last week and from a presentation that I did back last year in Free Code Camp talking about career paths in software development. And also last week, I talked about much of my own journey. And so I think last week I kind of broke it up between doing some slides from the presentation and then also going into some questions and stuff. So I'm going to put timestamps on that so you can kind of skip over if you didn't want to see the questions because they were just stacking up in the chat. So I tried to split my time. Today I'm going to try mostly to stay focused and to get through the rest of the slides. I left off on the technical leadership section. So last time we made it through all of the individual contributor roles, talked about leading up into software development and then becoming junior, mid, senior, etc. So now I still have the technical leadership roles, which I'm just briefly going to talk on, and then about engineering management, and then a few other topics and common questions that people have in their careers. And then I'm going to end with some research. And as always, if you have any feedback or you want to continue the discussion about anything, my link to Discord is below, so you can join my Discord and we can have further discussion about maybe something that's off topic or a deeper discussion about one of the things that I mentioned here. So, hey everyone, it's good to see you. If you don't know me, my name is Gwen. I work as the head of engineering slash tech lead still at a startup company. So we have an engineering team of less than 10 people now, and we're in the business to business space. So I basically joined this company at the point of trying to move from startup to scale up so that I could get experience working as a staff level engineer and now as a hybrid, staff or engineering manager. So I talked a little bit about the lead up from, becoming a senior engineer last time, and then the different pathways you can take from being a senior. So you can watch that video. And today I'm just going to dive right into, basically technical leadership roles, what I've learned about them over the years from, books and resources, and also my own experience working as a staff level engineer, principal engineer, and then a tech lead. So feel free to ask questions. I might pause a few times to answer some related questions, as I mentioned, but I'll try not to get too distracted this time. So this is basically, if you saw the original diagram, let me just show you the original diagram here. So it's a little more obvious what's going on. So let's go. Yeah. So if you can see my mouse. So you have these main levels. So first you have the pre-dev levels that we talked about, and then these individual contributor roles that are mostly linear. And then really from senior dev is where things really will open up in your career, where you can branch off in so many different directions. And so now we're going to talk about the direction of technical leadership. So staff engineer, principal engineer, tech lead. And so it's kind of going up here from staff to principal to tech lead, but not all companies go in that exact order, because I think especially with these kind of technical leadership roles, there are some general standards you'll see companies follow. But as far as the titling, some companies have maybe staff after principal, or I've seen some different variations of that. So usually tech lead is kind of the pinnacle or one of the top positions in this technical leadership track. But in this track, you're building off of each, every role kind of builds off of or gets promoted into each other, especially if you work at a company that's large enough to have multiple of these kind of roles. So at my company, for example, or a smaller company, so pretty much we've only had principal engineer and then tech lead. So other companies keep adding more and more roles there for to show different levels and to give people an opportunity at promotion and growth. So Again, there's a lot of listicles, just trying to get all the information in the presentation. So basically, when you're a staff engineer or you become one of these staff level roles, you start splitting your time more between leading technical decision making and then the actual coding or developing features and things like that that you're responsible for. So no longer are you just graded as an individual contributor. And this is really what it means, like moving from the individual contributor phase of your career. If you choose to move into one of these other directions, then you can be graded on a larger scale, like how is your team performing, or the, if you're going to management, or in this case, the technical direction of the company, how solid is your technical roadmap and how are your implementations going and stuff like that. So you're kind of graded on a larger scale of what your team is implementing versus just what you are. And so usually at this point, you're pulled into more meetings. You try to set the technical direction with the product team and other stakeholders, and you have to really communicate cross team more and more. And then also, you're not only pulled away from the code in the direction of having meetings, but at this time, you start to pull away more from the code in terms of having to plan. So you're doing more and more planning, and you're doing more things like at a lot of companies, if you're a staff level engineer, you're responsible for a certain level of architecture. So you might have those responsibilities. So in a lot of ways, if you love problem solving, you're still very much problem solving in your day-to-day being a staff level engineer. But here, instead of just in coding work, which you can do as your career in a senior level, here you're not only problem solving in terms of the implementation of the code, but in terms of the larger scale and broader impact across the company. So, okay, we're going to build these things, but we also have these things coming through the pipeline later on. Then how do we plan for those future things and build in a way now that we will be able to have an easier time later on? So yeah, that's basically the level of staff engineer. Again, it's hard to quantify really, but I have a very good book recommendation at the end that goes much deeper into it. I'd say these levels are harder to quantify because they're still kind of evolving, and it's kind of a new structure. It's not as solidified as maybe the individual contributor roles. So if you move through the ranks, I'm just skipping to tech lead because staff level engineer kind of, it combines a lot of different roles like principal and all of those other roles. So when you become a tech lead, you have a broader leadership role of the direction of the technology in the company. So maybe instead of thinking in terms of, these features or this group of features you're pulling in this sprint and next sprint maybe, but you're thinking months and months out. Maybe you're thinking, 6 to 12 months, the broader impact of technology. And you're also, with your interfacing with other departments, you need to be able to articulate your ideas very clearly to perhaps a non-technical community, which is very difficult, something I'm still learning how to do. And you must also be able to lead the team through influence. So you don't have direct authority over people. If you're in technical leadership, you're not that person's manager, but you have to have influence over the other people through, proving your expertise and experience and, the quality of technical direction you are giving to the team and to the company. And so people will look to you for that kind of direction at this level. So, at this level, you have a big responsibility because you have to not only advocate to the developers sometimes for, how we should implement things now to plan for later, but also you're advocating to perhaps other non-technical people or management to take time aside for tech debt and improvements and other things that might not be new feature work, right? They might be just things that we need to dedicate a certain percentage of our time because maybe this integration is expiring in 6 months, or we need to clean up these features because we have these other things coming up in the pipeline. So you really have to do kind of a broad level, or have a broad overview of everything that's going on, and be able to plan a long time in the future so that everything can go smoothly on the whole product roadmap from here. So me personally, I love this type of work. I love planning and interfacing and figuring things out at a higher level, and getting to do more architecture and figuring out like what tech debt do we need to clean up now to prepare for later, and figuring out those types of problems in addition to just, the raw fun day-to-day coding. So again, if you're a tech lead, you're going to be doing less like, typing on the keyboard, and more meetings, more planning, probably a lot more diagramming, in my experience. So yeah, this is one direction that you can take your career. Hopefully that gives you a good overview of some technical leadership roles. So this was really kind of my goal, I guess, after I became senior. I had no vision because I thought I didn't want to go into management yet, or maybe ever at that time. So I'm like, what do I want to do next? So I started kind of figuring out like, okay, I want to go in the architecture direction, but I'm not ready to be, of course, like a big architect or enterprise architect. So I think being a staff level engineer is a good way to also move into architecture. If you want to do more architecture, it's more of a natural progression from senior to staff level, instead of becoming a full-on architect, which can be a hard transition sometimes, depending on the company and their requirements, and how much experience you have architecture. This will gradually give you that experience as you kind of more slowly migrate from coding to architecture and higher level technical planning and stuff like that. Yeah. Hey, Anthony, it's good to see you. Yeah, so the next section is people management. So if you have a question, I'll try to get to it after I go through some of these. I just want to get through more of the slides this time. So in people management, you have different levels in becoming a manager. I just put like a summary. Usually you have dev manager and director of engineering, and then there's VP of engineering or CTO. And then there's some tangential roles that you can take, like chief information security officer and stuff like that. But generally, you'll have some form of these three roles in the progression. Of course, you can prepend senior and other stuff to kind of move up through the levels. And a lot of companies will have dev manager 1, dev manager 2, or dev manager and senior dev manager, etc. So in people management, what's different maybe from other fields, outside of technology, is that in people management, it's not just for, I guess it's not just like you go to management school and then you can become a dev manager. I've never seen the case where that works. You have to be very technical to be able to be an engineering leader. You have to be very much knowledgeable and experienced in the field. And those are the best dev managers I've had, had some kind of background in management and were trained in management, but also were very close to the engineering side and very technical. So what is a dev manager? So what your day may look like as a dev manager. And I got promoted over a year ago to the head of engineering. So I took over the engineering leadership at this company. Of course, we're a small company, so it's only one team. So my time started to move, and especially at first, we were hiring on a dev team. So, as the manager, you're going to have to start learning how to do recruiting and hiring for your team, how to, properly, screen candidates and go through the flow. which was kind of a learning curve, and you figure out what tools and processes to use that will respect the candidate's time, but also vet them properly. So you know they're going to fit in with your company and culture. And then, of course, you're interfacing with other teams kind of in a different way than you are. Because now, as a manager, you actually have people under you that you are responsible for. It's kind of different from a tech lead. You're kind of influencing from the technical side, but you're influencing from both the technical and the people side as a dev manager. So you're interfacing with other teams a lot. There's probably even more meetings as a manager than, as a tech lead. A tech lead, you get more time to step away and focus time and block off whole hours. That's very hard to do sometimes as a manager. When your team needs you, you need a lot of availability. So sometimes it's hard to balance the distracting work from being open to being pinged versus getting done what you need to get done and blocking off time. So a lot of dev managers that I know and I've seen spend very little time coding. It depends on the company. They do have some hybrid roles, which is what I'm doing now. So you can be a manager and also do some technical work. A lot of people prefer this type of role, but they don't have it at all companies, especially as you move further and further up into the management track. You might, spend months, without being able to touch the code at the company unless you're working on projects outside. So, so at this time, doing very little coding, your main mission as a manager is to keep your team members happy and productive and make sure there's nothing blocking them. They're able to do their work really well, and you have to manage a lot of interpersonal dynamics in tech. Sometimes our teams are very diverse. We have people from all over the world, different backgrounds, genders, etc. And you have to kind of figure out how to manage that and communicate well. And it's a big learning process. And I feel like I'm learning more about it every month and trying to read more books and figure out, how do I manage the people on the team well, and then also communicate and advocate for them to the company. And it's really not an easy thing. And it's something you have to keep up week after week. So I've been trying to implement systems so that I can keep up with team management properly and not forget about anything or anyone, etc. But I could do a whole video on what I've learned about that, but I'll leave it there. And then you're responsible kind of for the output of your team. And if your team, if they mesh well together, if they're happy, I really believe that, if people are happier, they're going to be much more productive. They're going to produce a lot more. They're going to care a lot more. And so that's really my main focus as a manager, trying to keep everybody happy so that we can deliver quality, timely features. Some of it is also, trying to figure out what to focus on, partitioning time and figuring out the goals of each team member. So some team members, if they're stuck in one type of work, they're going to be very unhappy. So if they have a goal to do this other type of work, how can you help them achieve that goal while still working in your ecosystem? So recently at work, actually, I just set up a system of tracking goals just so that I wouldn't forget about anybody's goals. And I could also check in with them frequently and help them progress toward where they want to be, in their careers, in their life, etc. So, and then the dev manager is also very much responsible for the team culture. So you can advocate for time for your team to, take a few hours one day and do something to improve your team culture, your team dynamics, get the team members to know each other more, especially with companies being remote. Sometimes, thank you, Shay. Oh, I have to stop here. Shay actually works on my team. So she's watching my live stream now. It's good to see you. So if you're working remote, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes even I've felt very disconnected from people. So not to bother anybody, of course, but I've just realized it's so important to check in with people. And so I run down a list of everybody, in engineering, and I try to check in with them pretty much every day now, or almost every day. So 3 or 4 times a week, we actually have FaceTime with each other, whether it's a lunch and learn, a book club, or it's, let's see, what else do we do? We have our team meetings on Fridays. We do various things throughout the week. And then even individually, I'll ping people on Slack or something. And I'm just trying to be very mindful of having FaceTime with people. As a remote impersonal company, we don't have stand-ups. We have async stand-ups. We work across time zones. So I'm trying to be as involved and as available to people as much as I can, and just checking in with them. And I think one other aside, one important thing that I've realized working remote, I've been remote for about 5 years now, I think. Plus I was partially remote before that. Just turning on the camera. Sometimes I don't feel like turning on the camera. I've been coding all day in my pajamas or something, stuff like that. But I make a point to, set the example of turning on the camera myself, like 95% of the time, and also asking other people to turn on their cameras. It just adds that extra level of, interpersonal connection that you don't always get at a remote company. And I think that's so valuable and important. Of course, if you can meet in person, that's the best. For example, I have three people in the team. We all live in the same general area. So we try to meet up a couple times a month, which is great. And then remote people, we actually get to see, except for the contractors, like the internal employees, we get to see them at least a few times a year, which, is good for a remote team. So yeah, so that's pretty much my thoughts on dev management and some information about becoming a dev manager. One more thing is I was a little scared to go into management before. And actually, before I took this role at this company, I worked here as a tech lead, and I was actually looking to hire a manager. I was really trying to find and hire a manager. And we tried for a little while. It was also at the time over a year ago when it was, or last summer. So like, I don't know, 15, 16 months ago when we first started looking. It was very hot. It was very hard to hire somebody. And we found a lot of great people who maybe didn't want to leave their company. We didn't find the right fit. And so eventually I thought about it. I talked to some people in the industry actually. And then I thought, oh, maybe this is something that would be good for me, help me grow. I can try it out. So I've been doing that for a little over a year. It's definitely helped me a lot. So yeah, so it's not something to be scared of. A lot of people are scared of it. It's a good growth opportunity. And also, yeah, I guess I said it was the last thing, but one more thing is that if you read books about technical leadership and engineering management, you'll see they have something called the pendulum of engineering leadership. And it's basically, a pendulum, like, what does it do? Go back and forth. So it's basically, they say the best dev managers or technical managers, they will spend a couple years in management and then a couple years back in engineering. So for example, if you became a dev manager for a year or two and weren't really coding that much, but then you take a role as a senior or staff level engineer or a tech lead after that. So you go back, work in the technical side for a few years, and then you come back. So it really keeps you close to the technology, but you also don't get out of practice with management. And I think actually when you become a manager, you get a broader perspective and, also a better appreciation for what managers have to do and how hard the job is. So I think it's good experience to try out. Definitely read some books. If you're not open to it, read some books, ask people who are in management, and maybe, you'll have a different perspective on it. So once you move up the ranks, let's say you're a director, so maybe you have dev managers under you. So you're overseeing a larger engineering organization, kind of the product implementation. The higher up you move, the more impact you're expected to have across the company. And I was even talking to one of my engineering management friends this morning about it. and he's a higher level engineer at a bigger company. And he was saying that he's really graded off of the impact that he has on the broader organization in this, Fortune 50 company. So usually, directors will be managers of managers. It depends on the company size, because sometimes startups, you'll have the role or the title director, but you'll be acting more as a dev manager. So you should be, if you have managers or like managers under you, and then they have people under them, you'll perform something now called skip level one-on-ones. So as a dev manager, you'll have one-on-ones with your employees every week or two to talk about, progress and goals. And I want to make a video on what I've learned about that. And also I have some templates that I've created that I want to share. But when you become a manager of managers, you don't get direct interfacing with the team as much. But they have something called skip level one-on-ones that most companies do. And basically, it's you go down a few levels and have one-on-ones, maybe monthly or quarterly, with people a few levels down. So you get more direct insight into team members and team performance and dynamics and stuff. And maybe you would be better able to help the dev managers who work under you as well. So of course, as a director, you have to have really good relationships with other people at the company, most of whom will be non-technical. Sometimes, it's very hard to talk to, let's say, a salesperson or someone like that. Not like just general conversation about the weather or whatever, but in terms of company and the direction of the company, sometimes it's very hard because you're speaking two totally different languages. You're coming from the technical side, the other person's coming from the people side, and you really have to learn how to work through that, which is something I'm still learning how to do, reading about, asking for advice about, but it's something that I realized just takes practice. It doesn't happen right away. It's more like a learning process. So yeah, for director, VP, CTO. So a lot of times if you're at the highest level, you'll be quite removed from the day-to-day technical work, and you'll mostly be working on high-level vision and strategies, aligning with investors in different departments, and making sure your whole department is aligned with them as well. Because really at this point, you're probably in charge of maybe several layers of management or whole teams or stuff like that. So, and here, the CEO is so busy doing his day-to-day work. At this level, you're like advising the CEO and other departments from the technical side, you're providing your perspective into decision-making that's happening at the top level of the company, making sure that they're well guided in the technical direction as well. At this level, you might also have to concern yourself with things like compliance, SOC 2, auditing, stuff like that, which might be handled by somebody else, but is sometimes also handled by you as a high-level technical leader. And then you also be invited to very important meetings with investors that you have to really plan for and prepare like presentations for. So sometimes your managers, from people I've talked to, their managers will also make presentations for them, and then they'll work with their managers to make these like high-level presentations that sometimes take quite a bit of time to put together to be able to present to investors and stakeholders to propose new projects and stuff like that. So you're managing all of these people who are also managing other people. So sometimes it gets very tricky to manage so many layers of people, but I can't talk too much about this because I don't have experience managing several layers of people, just one layer, mostly just one team with me. So for startups, usually the co-founder, regardless of experience, will become something like the CTO. So sometimes at a startup, you'll have the CTO hiring people, more experienced than them to like build out the product. And sometimes they don't have as much experience, or they have a different type of experience. And so the CTO is not also always the most experienced. Sometimes it's just the founder of the company or something like that, because they're not in the day-to-day coding weeds almost never, unless the company is still really, really small. yeah, so that's when you get into the fun world of people management. So yeah, at the end, I also have some great books about it. Oh, hi everybody. Hi, Tyler. Universal. You were at Kenzie Academy with me. So just FYI, I used to work at Kenzie Academy. I actually took a contract there to teach. I taught, React and Node development for 3 months as the lead instructor of the curriculum. And then I moved on to what I was originally hired for, which is curriculum development. I was just like a fill-in head instructor for that. But yeah, I can't recognize you, obviously, from your picture or name, but it's good to see you. It's definitely an interesting and good experience working at coding schools. I talk about that in some of my other videos if you want to watch that. So there are some other roles. So let me just go back to this slide again. So we kind of talked about, once you hit senior, where are you going to go? You could go into technical leadership, you could go into people management, but a lot of people take these other specialty roles. Sometimes they're very lucrative or they're just very interesting to you. So we're going to talk about a couple of these here. So yeah, let's talk about these post-individual contributor roles. So this is kind of what I did for a while. I worked as a consultant mostly for companies. And again, it can be lucrative, very flexible, especially if you're working for yourself or if you have such an in-demand skill set. I was talking to someone, again, who I was talking to this morning about some of their integration knowledge and how rare it was for someone to have that skill set. So they are extremely in demand because of that. And, I used to work on, when I first started out, less than a year into my career, I started working on Salesforce integrations. And I couldn't believe how much, I was getting, or the company was billing me out for per hour, just because it was the particular type of integrations I was working on. It just wasn't common knowledge at the time. It wasn't well documented. It was kind of hard to figure out. But of course, the people I worked with at the company already knew a lot about it. So they trained me. And then I was able to do that kind of work, which a lot of people needed, but not a lot of people knew how to do. So that can be extremely lucrative and flexible if you can find some kind of niche like that. And I would say a lot of times it's with some kind of integration, CRM tool, something like that, if you can find those. So this also requires a lot of networking. A lot of these people I see go to conferences, meet people at events, just reach out to people for coffee and stuff like that. I've been trying to do more and more of that. Just, it's good in terms of your career, but when you become a consultant trying to pull in certain types of work, sometimes you have to network a lot more. Instead of maybe like 2 hours a week, you might spend 5 or 6 hours a week networking. So one of the things that I see new consultants struggle with, and I know I struggled with this so much when I worked as a consultant, it's something you really need to learn just in general, but especially as a consultant, is good project management skills, like good agile skills, good sense of how and when to break tasks down, how long things will take, and knowing when to push back on timelines, because deadlines are a huge issue in software engineering. If you've seen the stats from surveys, something like, I don't want to quote the exact percentage because I can't remember, but a staggering number of projects in software development are late or never delivered. And that's because of project management, sometimes communication and other things. But generally, it's a lot of people being overly ambitious, which is really easy to do as software developers. We're very ambitious and we want to get this done. Oh, I can do this in 3 months. And really, it's a year-long project. But so what I learned as a consultant is I just needed to push back on deadlines. And actually, I feel like I get way better at this every year. Every year I'm in software development, I'm like, man, I used to be so bad at breaking down tasks and giving deadlines and stuff like that. So if you can learn how to really break down a task, know how long it's going to take, that is an incredibly valuable skill. And then, of course, you can't always know, so you give some buffer. Like if you think, oh, this will take me 2 weeks, then you say 3 weeks or something like that. You also have to factor in other things like writing tests, deployment issues, and things like that. And then, of course, with anything, but especially if you're a consultant, you need very good communication, because as a consultant, way more than an internal employee, you have to really break down what you're doing per day or per week and show people the value that you're providing. Communicate that and communicate any hindrances, or you basically have to show people why you're valuable and remind them why it's important, why you're doing what you're doing, and be very communicative about any problems, issues, and very on top of, timelines, deadlines, communicating about that kind of stuff. Of course, if you're a consultant, it's kind of developer adjacent. Like you could be a developer consultant, but you can also be, a cloud expert, security engineer, DevOps engineer. Any of those type of things can also be very lucrative in consulting, depending on the niche. So what about architect? So there are different levels of architect. So the type of architecture I have the most experience with, for example, I've never had the title architect, but I've done quite a bit of architecture now, is basically, I kind of got lost in that. Yeah, so different levels. So the type of architecture that I've done is mostly with startups, small companies, stuff like that. But sometimes you're just architecting a small feature as a developer, but when you become like an actual software architect, you're more like diagramming and planning larger things. And that's, at different levels. So generally when people hire specifically an architect in that role, it's a medium or larger company. And so you'll see roles like on the hiring platforms for like enterprise architect. And at that point, you're not usually spending very much time coding. Although I did listen to a podcast recently where some big companies are trying to have their architects spend a small percentage of their time, like at least 20% of their time, programming, feature building, so that they're very close to the coding aspect and not I guess, detached from that, so they still can properly plan things for the engineering teams. So a lot of time for architects is spent creating diagrams and documents, outlining new implementation solutions to problems. And if you're, at the enterprise level, you're probably just like a tech lead. You are in meetings with various departments, coming up with plans and trajectories. And yeah, sometimes this role can have the most say in any technical decisions. Like at one company I worked for, we had an enterprise architect, and it was probably the most lucrative tech role at the whole company. And it was like setting from the top down, the technical direction for everything we would be doing. So I think, in some ways there's a lot of overlap with the tech lead position. But as you get bigger, roles get more specialized. So I think in the beginning of my career and in a lot of people's careers, I think we make a lot of mistakes not asking the right questions, thinking that the title, just from the title or just from the job description, we can figure out what the role is, but that's not always what it really is, right? But again, at a larger company, these roles are more well-defined. So the bigger company you go to, the more you can expect, okay, I'm going to be doing, actual software architecture, analyzing and articulating really well the trade-offs in system design and stuff like that. So yeah. And then developer evangelist. This is something I was interested in a few years ago. I have quite a few friends who work in this, of course, just making YouTube videos and stuff. I've met some of these people. So it's kind of interesting because, developer evangelists and developer advocates didn't exist or weren't really a big thing just a few years ago, it seems. But now they've grown into this big role where even they have different levels of developer evangelists at some companies. So it seems to be rapidly evolving. And this is one like post individual contributor role where you don't always need to become a senior developer first to do this. If you have excellent presentation skills and can break down technical concepts and you have more of a teacher skill set, then I think developer evangelists could be something you could move into with just a little bit of experience in tech. But most of the people I know, were senior developers or at least several years of experience. So different companies do different things because I did a lot of research about this before. Some of them are creating technical content. Some of them are giving talks and going to a lot of conferences. Some of them are actually interacting with a lot of users, and they could be internal or external users, like inside a company. If it's a very large company, you can be a developer advocate for the developers, or you could be advocating for developers outside of your company. And so you might be spending a percentage of your time, a good percentage of your time, interacting with developers who use your product or features or whatever, and you will both be the company's advocate to the users and the user's advocate to the company. So you're kind of standing in the middle, and you're helping the end user kind of get what they want, and also the users are communicating back from the user to the company what those users might want to see more of. And then, of course, some developer advocate roles or developer evangelist roles will more strictly just be creating content. But I think usually it's a hybrid of the two, and they have certain features and stuff. Yeah. So I think that was a really interesting role, something I was interested in. But I think at this point in my career, I worked in like website and WordPress and stuff. And then it's been like, I'd say a little over 8 years since I got my first job in software development. So I feel like I still have so much to learn. So that I didn't want to only focus on creating content, giving talks, stuff like that at this point yet in my career. Because, I've been learning so much, even like moving into management last year and then getting to work as a tech lead, all of that stuff. I feel like I have so much more growth to do first before I just take a break and only give talks and content and stuff. So, of course, there's other tangential roles. Sometimes developers will move into a role. They'll become a designer or a testing expert and stuff. Some people just really like that side of things, especially people who try front-end development really like it, might learn UX design and kind of move in that direction. And I've seen some developers with a little bit of experience move toward UX design, and those designers, those UX designers with a developer background, sometimes they're so nice to work with. I'm not saying other designers aren't nice to work with, but they have the technical chops, which makes it a little bit easier to communicate things with them. And then also when they're designing, they're thinking from the technical perspective. Okay, how am I gonna create this and design it so it fits in and it will be in line with the time frame that we have. And I think it's just a good crossover experience to have if you're working on web or mobile or whatever, to have some design experience if you're a developer. But if you're a developer, you move into UX design, that's also an incredibly valuable intersection or skill set to have. So as a designer, of course, you're going to be doing design work, mock-ups, wireframes. Some of the most interesting work that some types of designers do, I think, is UX research, or maybe just running UX stakeholder meetings with the client, getting them to try out new features. I think that's, extremely interesting work. Some designers also do a bit of front-end work, depending on the company. And sometimes you can talk to the company and say, hey, I would like this type of role, whether it's technical or design, and they can kind of give you a hybrid role, especially at, I'd say at bigger companies, they have more resources to kind of give you specialty roles, but then also at very small companies, you'll get that crossover naturally. Like they say with startups, you have to wear a lot of hats, meaning you have to sometimes work in a lot of different roles. Yeah. So those are kind of some post individual contributor roles that you can think about moving into. I made a whole video about this types of employment, but I just touch on this briefly in this talk. So I think a lot of people, when they start coding, they start getting into freelance, or people who want to work with themselves. I would say this is a great place to start because it gives you some experience, and it's experience, is of course what you need to get into software development. You can make a little bit of work, or you can make some money doing this, and some people are probably successful at it. But from what I've seen, freelancing is often undervalued work. So this is just my opinion about it. But sometimes it's hard to get work and get your work to be valuable enough as a freelancer. So I think it's a good jumping off point to move into a software development career. And then if you want to do freelancing, or in other words, working for yourself, then, make it to senior level, become a consultant, and then you get paid more and valued a lot more for the type of work that you do. That's my opinion about that. So there's also contract work. You don't have to work full-time for a company. Some people who like to change up, take on new projects, new challenges, jump into something, get really excited about it, and then, get kind of bored after 6 months. This is a great type of work. So usually you'll be kind of self-employed. You'll be on a contract. I can't remember the number in the US, but it's not a W-2, but it's like it's a 1099 contract or something. So most contracts I've seen are from 3 to 12 months. Some of them, a minority of them, will be a contract to hire, which is kind of different because they're trying you out for a certain amount of time, and then they'll hire you on if they want to keep you, if you've done a good job and it fits with the company. Yes, sometimes this is good because if you have contract work, then if you're going to switch companies frequently and that's your personality, sometimes it's good to either work for a consulting company or take contract work, because then you won't be, I guess, dinged. Like when people look at your resume, it's like, oh, why did you switch jobs all the time? Well, I was on contract, so it was only a 6 months contract. And then if you're just, helping out a company do a specific thing for 6 months. So I think this is good if you know that you want something new and fresh. Look into this, or working for a consulting company to start. Sometimes this is also a good intro to development work. It's especially now, it seems like it's very hard to be hired as a junior developer. So you have to kind of find other avenues sometimes, like take an internship, do some freelancing, find a contract. Someone will hire you for 3 months, even if it's less pay than you want. It's experience. And once you have experience on your resume, then, companies aren't taking a big risk on you when they hire you, because they're like, oh, another company has already hired and been successful with this person, so I can hire them. The only thing with contract work is you have to meticulously track your hours. So this was hard for me. Actually, when I first started the consulting company, I think like 2 months in, I made some mistakes with my hours. I kept forgetting to count them. So that was my write-up in my software development career. I got written up for not tracking my hours properly. And so I guess repented, or I changed. And I tried to be much better about tracking my hours after that. Although I had some struggles definitely at other companies, like exactly tracking billable hours versus non-billable hours, remembering how to always track. I think at this stage, I've gotten much better, mostly using software tools and timers and figuring out systems and starting to log things when I stop and start. Maybe it's just because I'm older, I'm better at it. I don't know. But yeah, I'd say that's the one harder thing when you're on the contract or consulting type work, hour tracking. So full-time internal, this is most regular software development work. We'll be hiring for full-time. You'll get salary, benefits. It's a lot of stability, especially in some countries that have good labor laws. It's harder to let you go because sometimes they have to prove. The United States is an at-will place, so I think everywhere, maybe not in some states like California, but most places, companies can let go of you at any time, and you can also, leave the company at any time. Some countries I've seen, like Canada, you have to have a reason for letting the person go. So sometimes the stability of taking full-time work is a little bit less pay than you would get maybe consulting or something, but it's also stable and harder to let you go. And you get the stable paycheck and you can get a lot of benefits, like maybe they pay for your education. Right now I'm considering going to a master's degree in the future. So I'm thinking, if I pay for it out of pocket, or maybe, whenever I want to go for that degree, maybe I'll be working for a company that will pay for it. That's a consideration to take. So it can be hard to get much of a raise in full-time work. With contracts or consulting, you can negotiate more and take on bigger contracts and stuff like that. Full-time work, generally you're getting like maybe a 2 to 4% raise every year, plus bonus. And then if it happens to be a year you get a promotion, you might get a little bit of a raise. But generally full-time work, the best way to get the big raises are to switch companies, which is what most people do. And then of course, if you try to switch and the company wants to keep you, they'll offer you a raise. Sometimes you have to play that game a little bit. But I think full-time work has a lot of benefits, but then some drawbacks too. So you have to kind of figure out, because if you take a full-time job, hopefully you're going to stay there at least a year and a half, 2 years to be valuable to the company. So those are the different types of employment. Of course, there might be part-time work. I think it's not that common in software development. Maybe if you work for a small company, usually you're taking some kind of contract. If you're, I guess, part-time, you could do consulting, like 10, 15 hours a week. That's very common. So those types of employment. I did this in another video as well, but wanted to talk a little bit about the types of companies you might work for. So if you look at, let's say, tech companies versus non-tech companies. So there's kind of a difference between tech companies versus non-tech companies. A lot of tech companies, I won't say they almost value the software developers more, because the company is more in line with technology, and their software product is their core product. So they care a lot about their software developers. Sometimes, that's good. Like you get a lot of benefits and resources. Sometimes you're also pushed more as a software developer. Whereas in a non-tech company, sometimes you're taking a back seat and you're not the main product. You're building like these tangential applications that are used internally or externally as part of a larger company and product that you're serving. So at tech companies, usually have more opportunities for mentorship and growth. Sometimes also at tech companies, you have less work-life balance, it seems. But again, it depends on the company. But this is just like my broad overview. A lot of times the non-tech companies have kind of the same clock in, clock out cycle for developers that they do for other people. So, you start at one time, you get a lunch break, you clock out, you have a dress code, all of those things. Like if you work in finance or business, you're treated just like the other employees. So sometimes the non-tech companies are more stable and sometimes they're not. I think a lot of non-tech companies, you might have or be expected to have the same job for a very long time. Whereas if you work with the tech company, I think the average turnover for software development for a software developer is like a year and a half or so. So I think I prefer tech companies just because of getting to work with usually more cutting edge technologies, people who are in tech getting more mentorship and opportunity and benefits and stuff. But there's definitely a trade-off there. Yes, so startups. This is where I found most of my time, either consulting for startups or working at startups. So I'd say they're usually less than 100 people. It's usually a fast-paced work environment that values like working hard, the startup grind. It can be very hard. Like if this is your first job at a startup, of course you might have to take whatever job just for experience. But sometimes the grind is just really hard while you're learning. And other people may or may not have time to mentor you enough to the level that you need if you're first starting out. So I think, startups have the most burnout of any company type, because they took investor money and they have to grow. So it's stressful for everybody, down from the CEO to the management of the company, sometimes to the employees, like, oh, we have to grow, we have to produce all of these things. So I think my sweet spot for companies is like, I like to work at startups, but I like when they've matured a little bit. So the place where they're growing from startup to scale up, I think that's a very interesting architectural problem to solve. And there's a lot of really exciting work to be done. Once they've figured out their domain, they have what the business world calls like product market fit somewhat. And then you can kind of work on the technology, like, okay, they took this product, they built like a prototype or something that they just got working, and now we have to move beyond the MVP and build this out so it can scale, so we can handle more customers and features and growth in the app and in the user base. So so there's different types of startups. And if you are at the point where you are really excited and loving, wanting to code and ready to work a little bit more. But I think startups can be good. I think you just have to be careful and, set some boundaries if it concerns your mental health. Like, like for me, I don't set so much time boundaries. Like I don't say I'm not going to work in the evenings, but I set boundaries like I'm going to do these other things and block off time for the things that I want to do during the week. So that's what works for me. But with startups, otherwise, I find myself just feeling like I have to work 100% of the time if I don't put time blocks in my calendar, before I start the week. But anyway, and then you get to small companies. So small companies are kind of similar to startups, but a lot of them, are small consultancies or just small businesses, or just like regular software companies that did not take investor money. So they're not pushed to artificially or to grow at an artificially fast pace. They're just pushed to make a really good product. And so I think in terms of developer happiness, work-life balance, if you want those type of things, I think working at a company like Balsamiq is a really good company, for example. So Balsamiq, I know there's a lot of stuff that happened with Basecamp, so I made these slides a long time ago, but whatever your opinion is about that. But I really like the company Balsamiq. I've used their tool for years. It's like a little wireframing tool, but it's easy for me to use as a developer for wireframing and even sometimes sketching up or diagramming quick things for the team. So or when I'm making a personal project, I'll just really quickly make wireframes for what I'm going to build and all the features, and then go back and forth between that and the schema. So I think sometimes it's a really good thing. Like if you can work for a small company, you could have a really stable, good job, maybe not the highest paying job, but it can be a lot of fun. You're not pushed to grow. You can have a great work-life balance, a lot of benefits and perks, again, with maybe less pay. But if that's what you're after, then I think this would be a good option for you. Kind of the same with medium companies, although there's a lot more corporate red tape. So with small companies, you have more creative control, more autonomy, and more impact on what you're building. With medium companies, you start to have less and less end user impact, and you're kind of seeing the impact through, all hands meetings where they're showing you the impact of the features you build rather than directly from the users. So when you get to a medium company, usually you have well-defined systems. Sometimes you like those systems, sometimes you don't, but usually there's not much you can do about it at this size of a company. So if you, for example, they might do Scrum. A lot of companies use Scrum. So they'll do, all of the agile Scrum ceremonies. And sometimes they're very rigid around that. And, different people have different opinions if it's the best way to work or the most efficient. But just in terms of planning for 2-week blocks, and all the different, like almost religious ceremonies they have with stand-ups and retros and stuff like that. So yeah, usually you'll go in with well-defined systems. This can be a great place to learn and grow without that pressure of being at a startup, and also without, if you're at a small company, you might not have too many people, especially when you get to a certain level, you might not have too many people who are able to mentor you. But at a medium company, there might be more developers who can mentor you. A lot of companies at this size, though, it seems like they're not all tech companies. Like a lot of them are companies in other industries where they hire technologists at companies this size, because a lot of tech jobs are in startups or in the Fortune 500 space. So, and then enterprises. So enterprises are a great experience. I think, in my opinion, at least one time in your career, it's good to get that experience and taste of an enterprise. They have tons of processes and rules in place, and it's a good place to learn design patterns, engineering standards, get lots of mentorship, work in a really strict environment, and learn how to break things down really well and how to have a really good process. It can take many years to get to the same level in terms of having autonomy and being able to create impact. So it can take many years to create that much impact, the same that you would have day one at a startup. But there are also a lot of benefits. Like I talked about before, they could get pay for your college tuition, or you could get a lot of different, they have training budgets, and they have programs already in place, and of course, a lot less chaos. So the mentorship, learning, growth opportunities are just, at an enterprise aren't really available at smaller companies. But again, at smaller companies, you have you have different kinds of growth opportunities. So I think they are both good and they are both valuable. I will say at an enterprise, sometimes you'd feel like this tiny cog in a wheel because there's so many developers. It's like, what am I even doing day to day? And this is how I felt when I worked at an enterprise for a little while. I was actually contracting with them through a consulting company, but I was working full time at the enterprise, like going into the office every day. So there were a lot of, challenges, and I didn't really, in a lot of ways, I wasn't the one making decisions. Like the process was already in place. This is what we're doing. And the decisions that I was able to make at that time were mostly like, okay, I'm going to improve some code quality here, or fix these things, or maybe I want to work on this ticket of the bucket that we pulled in for this sprint. So I'm going to pull in this ticket. So it's like small impact in some ways. And then you'd really see the impact again when they had the all company meetings, or some level of leadership is giving you some kind of chart or metrics on, oh, this is the impact that your team had and this feature that you built had and stuff. But you really don't get any visibility usually into the users and the clients. So I guess I'm going back to consultancies. Most consultancies are small or medium size, and some of them specialize in greenfield projects. So they're working fresh, they're building an app for somebody. Sometimes they're doing brownfield, so they're just making updates to an already built app. And then there's also another type of role that you could take. So if you work at a consultancy, basically sometimes they take on projects internally in both green or brownfield applications, but then also there's this other type of consultancy work that's staff augmentation. So and that's basically what I was doing when I worked at that enterprise. I worked for the consultancy full time, but they sent me to this other place. So I was actually driving into work every day. My coworkers working next to me were all enterprise employees, and I was the consultant working on the team with them. It felt like I was, working for that enterprise because that's where I went every day. But at the same time, I didn't get all the benefits of working for that enterprise. So I would say that most people who go to work at these consultancies want to work internally with the consultancy on new applications. So I think if you're going to work at these consultancies, because I was kind of surprised, I went to work at this consultancy. I was kind of sold the vision that I would be working on this new greenfield project they had coming up. But then that project got canceled, but I was already working there. So they sent me to work at this enterprise. And I was working with the enterprise, but I wasn't really an employee, so I didn't get the benefits. Like I couldn't even use the basketball court and stuff like that because it was a liability. I had to get billable hours, so other people could leave early or something, but I had to stay and get a certain amount of billable hours. So it was a bit different. But I also liked, and a lot of people like that you could change projects, because if you work for a consultancy and you're tired of a project after 6 or 12 months, say, hey, I want to roll into another project, they'll just move you. So you don't have to stay in the same type of work. And it can give you a good opportunity. That gave me the opportunity to, learn different languages. That's why I've worked in so many different languages. I've gotten to work in different types of development, cloud, and some mobile and DevOps. And I got to experience a lot of different things getting to work with these consultancies, taking tasks on different projects. And the smaller consultancy, usually the more you'll be able to dive into different projects, like, oh, I'm going to spend a week on this and, some time on this and split my time between these two things. So it was good experience. And I'm very thankful and happy that I had the experience. Oh, someone asked what's a brownfield project? I don't know if you just asked that, but that's a project that's already been built. Like if I have an app I already made, but I want to hire developers to update it or to build out new features, that's a brownfield project. It's something already made. You're not starting from scratch. Greenfield is like where you start from the very beginning. You're architecting, building everything as a brand new project. And sometimes greenfield is a lot of fun, getting to build something new, but sometimes I've realized also brownfield's a lot of fun, getting to figure out a new system and diving in and figuring out how to jump through the code, almost making a game of it. And then I wanted to point this out a little bit because there's differences in types of applications you make. Of course, there's mobile versus web versus desktop versus embedded and, different genres and stuff. But there's also these other related things that a lot of people don't think about. Like, are you working for a company that does B2B work? So you're an app that helps businesses sell to other businesses, or you're an app or maybe you yourself are selling to businesses, or you're an app that helps businesses sell to consumers, or you are selling something directly yourself to consumers. So business to business is kind of the market that I'm in. And with business to business applications is far fewer users because you just have usually some type of big or small businesses that are your clients. And you have new features that have more to do with their company direction. So you do kind of more customization sometimes for business to business because you have larger clients. And instead of with a B2C app, so if you're selling directly to consumer, you'll have tons of users, so you can't customize per user or spend too much time even on tickets for individual users because you just have such a large user base. So sometimes it's I think a little more stressful, I guess, or stressful on both ends. It can be. So with B2C, you have a lot more tickets coming in right? And because you have so many users and, oh, I can't log in, I can't do this, I can't do that. So you have to deal with all of those things, but then, and you also, the infrastructure has to scale or be able to scale more. And then B2B, you have to worry about things like compliance and, enterprise sales cycles and all that stuff, which is, it takes a lot longer. And that's why most apps are B2C. But I think it's a more profitable niche because it's harder to get into in the B2B market space. And yeah, that's just my preference, I guess, where I found myself and where I like to work in the business to business space, trying to support business clients rather than end users. But I think that's just one interesting consideration, while you're looking at different companies. It's the type of business, not just the type of job you're going to do, but the industry plus the type of business plus the technical challenges that you're going to get to solve in that type of company and role. So yeah, that was my 2 cents about companies. Yeah, I think Greenfield, I think Greenfield apps are talked about more. Maybe they just don't give it the name brownfield, but I think in consultancies, that's where I heard that term brownfield, because we differentiated between the two more in consultancies. And for, I guess, what is it? Like scheduling and resource allotment and stuff like that. Okay. So with all of this, with all of your, process of growing in software development, I think one critical thing is setting a goal. So, you know where you end up or where you want to go, you have some direction, and especially to give you motivation to continue when it's hard. You have some kind of dream or vision or goal to get to. So I'm not going to go over how to set a goal. I think there's so much information online, and everyone has their own kind of way of setting a goal. But some questions I like to ask about it are, I ask myself, like, where do you want to be in 5 years? What kind of lifestyle do you want? Which style of work do you prefer? And I've been trying to ask those questions. Now in my career, I feel kind of set. Like I kind of know my trajectory and direction and where I want to go. But in the beginning of my career, that was very fuzzy. So I started setting goals like, oh, I want to be a senior developer, or, oh, I want to try out this type of work. How do I get there? Because my first job, my first job, outside of doing like WordPress, word sites and stuff, back in 2015, I got my first job, and it was like PHP and front end work. And I was just trying to get a job at that time. I had no idea what I was doing. And then after that, I said, oh, okay, now I want to work at a real tech company. And so I kept looking, and then I found that like a small consultancy that was willing to hire me. And then from there, it was just like, oh, I want to learn this type of development. Like I want to learn mobile. And so I got to try it at that consultancy, which I had already built like iPhone apps for myself, but I didn't really launch anything for a client before that in terms of phone apps. So, and then I was like, oh, I want to learn AWS. So then I studied AWS a lot. And then, and then there was this type and that type. And I think as I moved on, it was less about the type of development, because I tried lots of different things. It was more about, okay, I want to move to this level so I can, be a senior and then move into architecture and, get this type of experience. So the types of goals I set changed over time, but I always try to have, some kind of goal or focus that I want to work on. And then from there, I try to create a strategy. And especially I try to find a mentor or mentors who are in that role, can kind of guide me to that role, invite them out for coffee. And then I try to choose the right company type and really look into my next job. Like, okay, I want to get here. Will this company help me get there? And having a goal will allow you to be able to strategize like that instead of just randomly taking jobs that you may or may not be happy at. And it's also helped me get through some times when I was, feeling a little burned out or like a little frustrated. Having that end goal, I was like, okay, well, I'm experiencing this temporarily, but I'll get through it and then I'm going to move on. And then, having a goal, I can also ask for feedback from people around me. So this is kind of internal, but also maybe external to the company. So if you have a goal and if you're working at a company, your manager should help you set goals. So they can help you track and progress. And then if you have a goal, you're able to get feedback. And you say, hey, I'm working on improving whatever, my PR quality or something. Can you give me feedback, or how do I get better? And then you can ask for feedback from everybody and improve more, if you have that goal and you've thought it through. So I just wanted to give a little bit aside about goal setting. And I think in the beginning too, I was setting goals like I'm going to network to this many people because I was so afraid of talking to people and I would start to panic. So I'd set this goal, hey, I'm going to go to this meeting and I'm going to talk to at least one person. So that was, really helpful at first. So one other really common question is if you should be a specialist or a generalist. And I kind of talk about this in my book, but I'm just going to summarize it here. So what I recommend is specializing in one language and a few frameworks. So maybe one or two frameworks to do with that language. You can specialize and get really good at it and then know all of the tooling to go along with that. So you can kind of generalize in the ecosystem that you're working in, but specialize in a particular niche. Like let's say at first, and this is, when you're starting out. So at first, maybe you want to be a front-end developer. So you specialize in that. You might learn like Vue and React or something, and then you learn all of the tooling that is commonly used with those things, like what is used in the ecosystem. And then you can market yourself as a front-end developer, or if you want a back-end developer or mobile developer or whatever. So I think it's good to specialize because otherwise it's very hard initially, like, before you've had any experience or you're just getting started out, your first job, it's very hard to learn everything. In fact, it's impossible to learn everything in every language. As you move on through your career and you work in different languages, it's easier to switch from language to language and tool to tool. But I think initially, and this is a lot of times what newer developers are better at, is learning the syntax of a language really, really well, getting, comfortable with the language and the ecosystem and how to develop in it. And I think that's very important in the first few years. And you'll notice, or I notice a lot of times, like as you get, past senior level, especially the developer, like let's say a staff level engineer might not actually know as much just raw syntax of a language than a junior or mid-level developer. But they have such a broader perspective and they'll know how to problem solve. And syntax is always something, you can look up. But I do think at the beginning, it's really important to know the syntax of a language so you can be seen as professional, especially when you're pairing with more experienced developers. It will help you in, coding challenges, especially live coding challenges. So I think that's really good early on in your career. Learn one language and learn it really well. And then, you can start to generalize to other languages later on. But you should be able to build professional level applications in that one language, as soon as possible. So so this is the end. These are some resources I recommend. I'll post this after, or I think I can actually might be able to. This is on slides.com. Let me just see if I can post the link now. Oh, it's actually logging into the wrong user. Oh, that's in Brave. Okay, let me find it in Firefox. I'm logged into my other account. So I'm just gonna post the link, share, copy link. Here you go. So this is the link for the slides. You should be able to see. Oh, thank you, Anthony. I spent a lot of time writing that book. And that the book that's currently published is version 2, but I also have version 3. I'm going to be doing some updates next year. I'm trying to do some updates. So thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, so of course, this is my book in the top corner, Learn to Code. That's what I recommend it also because so many people ask me a lot of questions for a long time, and I kind of just put those in a book in 2019. And then in 2020, the end of 2020, I released a new update just on all the different things you should do, when you're learning to code and trying to get your first job. And then here's just some other books I recommend reading. If you're junior or mid-level, I think these give you a really good, foundation. And one of these I'll point out is kind of a newer one that I didn't, have when I was starting out. It's called The Missing README. I can't remember the authors, but it's a no starch press book with like this bright blue cover. And I thought I read over it because I wanted to see, because I like no starch press, and I thought it was really interesting. And it kind of gives you an overview of so many different things that you need to know as a new software developer, and all the way from writing technical documentation to some architecture and stuff. I might have actually mentioned this earlier in the talk, but it's such a good book. I highly recommend it. And I can tell they put a lot of work into that book. And then just learning some about Agile and some stuff. Here's some books that I recommend about that. Oh, and there's a new Agile book that I found, but I'll post that in my Discord later. Okay, so those are, yeah, so here are some other resources. So senior or mid-level resources that I found very helpful. If you're interested in learning about the career paths past senior development, this book, Staff Engineer, is really good. Code that fits in your head, working effectively with legacy code is a good one to wrap your head around, learn how to jump into code bases. And then these are all the management ones I've read more recently. The manager's path and the making of a manager, they're all good. I kind of prioritize them between the ones that I recommend reading first. So anyway, I posted the link in the chat here, and then I'll also post it in the description and a comment. So you can check these out from the slides and let me know what you think. If you join my Discord server, I have a channel called Book Club that you can check out. We can just talk about books and other resources there. So yeah, I can share the links in my Discord as well right after I stop the stream. Let's see, did I miss anything here? Don't think so. Congratulations, everyone, for reaching levels. It's hard. I love Mrs. Faraday approach. Thank you. Yeah, I would say it was hard, working through it, but looking back, it was such an amazing, great opportunity and experience to be able to, work at different places with so many great people. I've had so many great mentors in my career. And someone recently actually offered to mentor me at the level that I'm at now, so I can grow, as a technical leader and manager, which is super exciting that there's so many great people that I've found in engineering willing to help. Someone did ask about DevOps, so a little off topic. If you want to join my Discord, we can talk more about that. But yeah, I think that's it. This took, oh my goodness, this took almost an hour and a half. And originally I had given this talk last summer, so over a year ago. I was actually right before I got promoted into engineering management. So I guess maybe I had a lot more to say, but it took like an hour and 30 minutes for that talk. This talk took 2 sessions of maybe like 3 hours total, or 3.5 hours total. So I hope this was useful information. If you have more questions, join me over at Discord. We can continue the discussion, but I do have to get back to work. And I assume that most of you have to get back to work or your studies. So yeah, have a great day, everybody. Thanks for your time and for joining. Take care.